Top of the morning to you all. Yonkers here with the College Football Breakdown Show, breaking down the Week 12 DraftKings main slate. It's pretty early over here on the West Coast. I wanted to get this video out to you Friday morning. Wanted to get it done before work. Yay. So yeah, if it starts a little slow and I seem a little tired, I swear I'm not dying of COVID. I'm just tired. But I'll wake up, and if I'm slurping my coffee, apologies. I need it. We got a good week of games. It's a pretty stacked slate, to be honest with you, especially with all the cancellations and whatnot. Last week there were, four cancellations on the main slate? And so far we've had none on the main slate. Knock on wood. And it's a great week of games. There aren't that many standout options as far as top ranked matchups or anything, but there's just a lot of games that might be pretty close. I'm anticipating a pretty good college football Saturday, so I'm looking forward to it. If you're new here, disclaimer, this is just free content to help you with your lineups. The main goal is to try to get you information. I know there's not that much information, especially free stuff for college football DFS, so for people like me who love fantasy football, especially college fantasy football, especially DFS, I just think you might find it helpful. So Twitter down below at YonkersCFB. And this is brought to you by thebreakdownsports.com. I will link my article with all of my thoughts. Usually I do a Twitter thread and an article. I'm trying to combine them both. I'm trying something new. So I will put that in the article, like all the thoughts, instead of just highlighting a few players, and I'll have that in the article. It's ready to go. It should be out by the time, somewhere around the time the video posts. So I will link that down when it is ready. All right, let's get started. First game up, we have LSU versus Arkansas. Taking a look at Arkansas's defense, they're allowing 183 rush yards per game at 4.4 yards per carry. So LSU might be able to get something done on the ground here. I'm not super thrilled about the running back options. I would say John Emery Jr. is probably the most talented back. And he's been getting more carries lately, but it's not by very much. I would think he would catch more passes as well going forward. He's been very hyped up, and so far he hasn't really done much with it. So this is an opportunity where maybe he could. However, he's been really splitting carries with TDP, Tyrion Davis-Price. So again, I would be Emery for the upside. Let me start by saying this matchup is something I'm going to have a lot of. Probably a little bit more on the Arkansas side. But you're going to want this matchup. Let me preface by saying that. The prices are really good overall, and it's a 63.5 game total. As far as quarterback, it sounds like we should get TJ Finley behind center. He's been very good in one of his starts. Very good. I didn't start him because they said they were going to split reps, and then they did not split reps. Even got a rushing touchdown. Big boy. This guy's a big boy. He's a load. And then he played Auburn, and you could see there he was god-awful. 2 fantasy points, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. So we don't know what to expect from TJ Finley. Most of the people before his first start that I listened to online, scouts, so to speak, they said they weren't a big fan of TJ Finley's game. They said or maybe one day, but they didn't think he was ready. He needed some time. So I'm going to mostly side with them. Arkansas doesn't have necessarily the stingiest defense, just athlete-wise in the SEC, but they do have a good defensive coordinator, Barry Odom. So Finley's a maybe. Just keep in mind if he struggles, he will likely cede reps to Max Johnson. Miles Brennan is out. If by a miracle he plays, I think he tried to practice this week at 4,500. He is pretty much a must-play in the Superflex, but I don't think anybody anticipates that happening. So game stacks are in play. Finley's very risky, but he could pay off big time if you're doing a game stack. So if you're a 150 guy, you should probably have some of those. I don't personally play 150. I probably won't have a ton of Finley, but I definitely see the appeal. As far as wide receiver, the clear guy is Terrace Marshall. He has 9 touchdowns already this year. He's a target hog, 29 fantasy points per game. Not much more I need to say there. The price isn't even that bad at $7,000. Does it worry me that TJ Finley is under center? It does a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I think that's why the price is down. Maybe. Not sure. But in one game where TJ Finley started, that South Carolina game, we saw he had 6 catches, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I think he's more touchdown dependent than I would like. You saw he exploded against Mizzou, but other than that, in 3 of his last 4 games, he hasn't gone over 100 yards. So those are not necessarily things I'm thrilled about. But like I said, still a matchup I'm kind of targeting, so I don't want to make it sound like he's a must play. I'll have lineups without him for sure due to that. Other than that, I think their other top pass catcher is the stud freshman tight end Eric Gilbert. He's been somewhat steady. He hasn't really exploded for a big game, but I think we can expect around 10 points from him. You see his average right there, 12 fantasy points per game. I think he's fine. Maybe he'll get better as the year goes on. He was Gatorade National Player of the Year as a tight end, which is pretty crazy. And he looks good as a freshman tight end, which usually freshman tight ends don't do much. Other than that, it's pretty much a crapshoot. Racey McMath and Keyshawn Boot are probably the guys I would look to. This guy Jenkins gets some work done. I'm not really thrilled about Dre Jenkins or Kirkland. McMath has a big body, and he's very athletic, so he always gets hyped up, but he hasn't really done much. He's been coming on a little bit stronger of late, I guess you could say. He did get 10 fantasy points in his last start, but with only 11 catches on the year, I'm not sure how I feel about that. So everybody else is pretty much a crapshoot. I would say you could do worse in a crapshoot in this game. All right, Arkansas. I'm interested in Arkansas. This LSU defense is allowing 335 passing yards per game. You heard that correct, 335. Burks has gone over 500 yards this year already. He has 21.4 DraftKings points per game. That's their top receiver, Traylon Burks, I'm talking about. So I will definitely stack a lot of Franks and Burks. I'll have some of them individually. I really like Burks here. I think he's a stud. Franks runs a little bit. He's inconsistent to say the least, but against this LSU defense, I don't really know how consistent you need to be. You just need to pop a few deep ones at least. Does it worry me that he's had under 20 DraftKings points in, one of those was against Ole Miss, and the other one was against Florida? Worries me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. The volume may not be fantastic. He's inconsistent. A game where you think he's going to do great against Ole Miss, he doesn't. And then he doubles up that performance the next week against Texas A&M. I do think he's hard to call, so I'm not really going to throw Franks in every single lineup. But, that price is too good. So this slate, the pricing's hard because there are so many good players. It's a stacked slate, especially at the quarterback position. Quarterbacks are stacked, so I will probably have one elite stud quarterback in every single lineup. And if I can't fit another one in, then that means I'm going to be looking to guys like Franks. As far as the running back position, I'll have some of the running back since, LSU's not exactly great in the run defense either. I think Rakeem Boyd is the guy you would look to here. He's outcarried Smith 38-22 in their last 3 games. However, Smith does have 115 receiving yards, a little bit more of a receiving threat, and he's been way more efficient with his carries lately, so difficult one to call. Let's check out Smith's game log. You can see here his attempts, 8, 9, 5. He does have a few receptions in there. And he has under, single-digit fantasy points in 3 of the last 4. Again, one of those against Ole Miss. So it's not a home run, but the pricing's great. I'd probably have more Boyd just since he's cheaper and gets more carries personally, but it's a toss-up. Both are fine. Burks, like I said, I like. Mike Woods is okay at 5,000 going against this bad defense. He has over 400 receiving yards on the year. He's more of a deep play guy. He's inconsistent. He's had some good games and had some not great games, so he's risky, but as a tournament guy, I think he's fine. I don't know if I would play both Burks and Woods and Franks unless I'm playing a lot of lineups, but that certainly, absolutely could pay off in a game stack. If you're just playing like one lineup, I don't know if you'd want to go there, but absolutely I would have some game stacks. Other than that, nothing really thrills me. Hunter Henry sees a lot of targets at 3.4 and gets a lot of catches, but he hasn't really done much with it. Did I just call him Hunter Henry? That's his brother. Hudson. My boy Hudson. I apologize. That's as far as I'm looking. The other wide receivers have been really disappointing. Burks is such a target hog, and Woods gets a fair amount. That not much going on outside of that. All right, this Florida offense, I don't think you really need me to go over them very much. They've been scoring a lot. I have been under-owned on them, it seems like every week, and they keep getting burned by Kyle Trask, so I'll make sure I get at least one Trask lineup in there this week, if not more. Vandy's defense, Vandy stinks. They're allowing 35.8 points per game. And yeah, Trask is putting up Burrow numbers. Through the first 6 games of the year, he's slightly outpacing Joe Burrow from last year, so it's just been incredible. Now, of course, the obvious worry is, do they blow them out? Yes, that's a worry. I'll just say right there, yes, it's a worry, but also how did they get to the point of it being blown out? Are they going to score 6 touchdowns in the first half? How many does Trask get? How many does the running back get? So on and so forth. I think the running backs are a little bit too cheap. This Vandy defense is allowing 6.0 yards per carry. And what that means to me is while teams haven't, basically, if the game gets out of hand, Florida's not a fantastic running team, but the game gets out of hand, which it probably will. Keep in mind, I'm not super sold on Florida because their defense isn't great this year. So there's a chance Vandy is not quite a blowout, if you know what I mean. Like it hangs around 5 scores or, 4 scores for a little while. But anyway, if it gets out of hand, if it does get out of hand, or if it's a very comfortable lead, Dameon Pierce at 5,300 would be my preferred guy. I think he's their top back to a team allowing 6.0 yards per carry. The other backs just see more receiving work, though. Malik Davis has 269 receiving yards on the year, and Wright has 134. So I don't think Wright's a bad punt play either, but Florida running backs never really thrill me. If I'm ever going to play one, it would be in this matchup. As far as the receivers, if Pitts plays, he is at 6,000 pretty much a must start for me, but basically we don't know if that's going to happen. Oh, we just got news. How about that? Nasal surgery will not play. Okay, there you have it. Not a must play by any means. A must not play. So Tony is their top guy. This guy is fantastic. He has an immense amount of talent. It's just been whether he's going to see a consistent amount of targets or not, and this year he finally is. And, of course, he's in play. If it's a blowout, again, maybe he doesn't get as much work, but he could also score 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, and not a single person would be surprised. I'm always under-owned on the Florida offense, so it seems like I'm not super thrilled about them. I still think they're completely fine. It's just the prices are kind of prohibitive to me. Other than that, I think Trayvon Grimes, I'm going to play some of him at 5,100. If Pitts was going to play, I probably wouldn't have any Grimes. However, he blew up. Last week he had over 100 yards. And his 4 games prior to that, he had only 130 total yards. So that tells me that he receives a bump with Pitts out. He's also, I think, he scored 5 touchdowns this year. So the workload may not be great, but it's better without Pitts, and he's a touchdown threat. So at 5,100, that's about all you can ask for. Other than that, I don't really have a read on any of these secondary guys. I think they're all fine. None of them see a ton of targets. But in this high-powered offense, you don't really need to. So if you're taking a crapshoot, I don't really have one guy I'm playing over the other. I probably won't play a ton of either of them. Now that I know Pitts is out, for some reason I kind of assumed Pitts was going to play. It sounded like he was close to playing last week, so wasn't quite prepared to play any of these guys. So not much to say about them on my end. They're all probably fine as a one-off. As far as Vandy, Ken Seals at 4,900. This Florida defense isn't super fantastic, so maybe I'm probably not going down that low, but I would not. You're not stupid at all if you're considering Seals at 4,900. Pretty talented freshman. Obviously he's had his struggles. KHB, Henry Brooks, had 30 carries last week and about 24 per game the last 3. Florida defense is allowing 185 rush yards per game, so obviously it's going to be a bad game script. He's more expensive than I would like as a Vanderbilt running back at 6,100, but it was worth mentioning. He's been seeing a ton of work. Other than that, the wide receivers, I will have some of them in as a one-off in lineups. Cam Johnson has been rather good. He's been rather consistent, and he's only 4,300 in a game they should be throwing because they're behind. So Cam Johnson's fine. He's their best player on offense. Other than that, I will have some of Pierce Jr., Chris Pierce Jr. This guy's come on as of late. He's only 3,500. Look at his last 3 weeks. 4 catches, 46, and a touchdown. 6 catches, 76, and a touchdown. And 3 catches, 53, and a touchdown. So been pretty consistent. Been over 14 points in each of his last 3 performances, and they are playing from behind. Now, you could say he hasn't done anything else all year, and I would agree with you, but it clearly seems like they're making an effort to get him on the field, and it clearly seems like it's working. So not a bad play there at 3,500. All right, moving on. Clemson versus Florida State. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this by now. It's a Clemson game. If you don't know a Clemson game by now, I'm kind of surprised you're watching this video. Could be a blowout. Anybody could score. Tough to say. To sum it up, Florida State's not very good. They beat North Carolina somehow, so maybe they have more heart in them. They've just decided to suck most games except for the odd one, but I doubt it. I think Clemson's going to pretty much run the table after that loss to Notre Dame. Not pretty much run the table, like flip the table over and run it over. Trevor Lawrence, 9,400, sure. ETN, I'll have some ETN. There are a few top running backs, and I definitely think he's one of them at 8,600. He's a little cheaper than guys like Breece Hall at 9,900 and Najee Harris at 9,300. So he's fine. He's seeing a ton of receptions out of the backfield. He has 642 rushing yards, 490 receiving yards. Just fantastic. And Florida State's rush defense is allowing 212 rush yards per game at a 5.2 yards per carry clip. So that spells disaster. Usually in a game like this, that might be a blowout. I would have interest in Lynn J. Dixon, their backup running back. I did that some last year, but he hasn't really done anything this year. Like, nothing. So, until I see it. Other than that, Amari Rodgers is their top wide receiver. I've been playing him. He's been too cheap every single week. He's been too cheap. I've been playing him. 7,300. He got a little more expensive, so by nature of that, I'll probably have less ownership. Other than that, Powell has come on pretty strong as of late. In his last 3 games, he's seen targets of 7, 12, and then 7, which, not bad at all. And, he scored a deep touchdown or 2 here and there. I think he had 2 in the Notre Dame game. I know he had that overtime touchdown. Only 1. I guess he had a deep pass, but they tackled him for the end zone. But, look at that fantasy points. 31, 24, 12, and 5 in his last 4 games. He's coming on strong. Of course, that's whether or not Frank Ladson Jr. is going to play. I can't keep up with the Ladson news. I guess he's now out a few weeks due to injury. What was that, the 10th? I don't know. I keep hearing he might be back. I'm assuming he's not playing. If he does come back, I think that does drop Powell a little bit. If he does play, I think he's fine at 4,200. Other than that, not really super interested. We keep hearing about Nada at 3,200. Just going to have a big game, but still hasn't happened. So until I see it. Galloway, their tight end's fine, but his work rate has been very, very inconsistent and not great. So at 3,900, a risk play, if anything. All right, Florida State, I'm not going to spend too much time on them. I will say that mobile quarterbacks have always, I don't want to say they've always been able to beat Clemson, but one of the ways to give Clemson trouble, not to have blasphemy this early in the morning, Clemson fans going to spam my Twitter. Nobody wants that. But yeah, having a mobile quarterback is good, and it sounds like Jordan Travis should be back. Chuba Purdy is out, and I think that's big for them. I think their offense has been a lot better with Jordan Travis. They've only really ever done anything of note when Jordan Travis is at running back. He does have, I lost it in my notes. He has a lot of rushing yards when he's been starting. You can see there. 48 in a TD, 96 in a TD, 107 and 2 TDs, 47 and 1 touchdown. Not bad throwing the ball either. He's gotten over 200 yards twice and very close to it in 1. So not a prolific thrower by any means. And of course, he's playing a better Clemson defense, but a truly mobile quarterback, like a good mobile quarterback at 5,500 is worth mentioning. Okay, as far as the stacking options, I'm not no interest in stacking because most of the value comes from the running back. I do think Wilson is the top guy at 4,900. The price isn't quite cheap enough for me. He does have 8 targets in each of his last 2 games without Tamari and Terry. Their star wide receiver is no longer playing this year. If you missed that, if you need a punt play, I think Helton at 3,500 would be the guy I would go to. I don't love it. He sees 4 targets pretty much every single game, but he's done pretty much nothing with them. So not super thrilled on the wide receiving options. As far as the running backs, Corbin keeps. This one's tough to figure out. It seemed like Webb was going to be the guy, and then Corbin out-touched him 14-5 last game. However, keep in mind when Travis comes back in the games he's been playing, the running backs don't get more than 10 carries. And if they do, I think the most they've received is like 12 carries in one game. So I expect each of them to get. Maybe one of them gets 12. Maybe Corbin gets somewhere in the 12 range. Webb gets somewhere in the 9 range. Who knows? But I don't see a huge workload. So I don't think they're going to pull a Kyron Williams here. I'm not super interested. They are very, very cheap if you need a lineup filler. Corbin, maybe. Moving on. Illinois versus Nebraska. This one has a total of 59 points. So there's going to be scoring in this one. And it's probably going to be sneaky because who really wants to play a ton of Illinois-Nebraska on a slate like this? Me? I don't really want to either, but I have to, a little bit here and there. Okay, the quarterback situation is tough to figure out. It sounds like Brandon Peters is going to be back. I think he's okay at 5,700. He's somewhat mobile. He really got off to a poor start last year, but he did have some big games last year. Nebraska defense isn't bad, but they have allowed 202 rush yards per game. So what I'll be monitoring is if we get any news. It sounds like probably Peters will get the start. But if Isaiah Williams gets the start against this beatable rush defense, just after going 31 carries for 192 yards and a touchdown, clean up those fumbles, man. Come on. He's not a good thrower of the football. Neither quarterback in this game is. They're both similar. But I think Isaiah Williams has some pretty high rushing upside here. Would not be bad as a cheap 5,600 option if he's going to start, but we don't even know that. And earlier on in the year, he was coming in and splitting reps with Peters a little bit, so probably will scare me off. As far as the running backs, Chase Brown outtouched Epstein 17-10 last week. Seems like we have a timeshare here. They're both similarly priced. It's a beatable rushing defense. If I knew one of these guys was going to be bell cow, I would start them, but I don't know that. I would assume Epstein is the more talented guy. I haven't watched a ton of Illinois football, but he's been hyped up more, dealt with a ton of injuries, so at this point, who knows? But it makes it really hard for me to start him after coming off a 10 carry for 18-yard performance. So I think both of them are okay, but not thrilled. I'm not going to look to the pass catchers in this offense, especially if Isaiah Williams is behind center. I think the immortal baby at 4,400 is a good talent, and he's always liable to catch a touchdown or break one. But the workload's not going to be great, and they might not be throwing the ball that much. All right, as far as Nebraska, I am interested in Luke McCaffrey. Illinois is allowing 189 rush yards per game. McCaffrey is definitely a runner. He hasn't really gotten in the end zone much, but he's been getting looks. If you watched the last game, he was getting looks. He just couldn't quite get in there. But Illinois is no Penn State defensively, so maybe he gets in there now. I am slightly concerned because there's always this chance Adrian Martinez comes back in the ballgame because they just haven't been able to scratch that itch that is Adrian Martinez there. Scott Frost loves him, so Adrian Martinez. Not a big Adrian Martinez fan. I'm sick of watching that guy play football. Hopefully I don't have to anymore. But if McCaffrey struggles, of course, Martinez could come back in the ballgame. And I would like the price to be a little bit better on McCaffrey. I know it's fine, but if he was even like 6,200, 6,500, I'd probably own him with a rushing upside. But I'm not sure how I feel about this. I might just pay up. He's not that much cheaper than some of the guys in the 8,000 range. I know that sounds weird, but I think he's okay. But you're banking on some pretty big rushing upside because he hasn't really shown the ability to throw the football very well. As far as the running backs, Dedrick Mills is their top guy at 6,200. He was banged up last week, and McCaffrey's going to steal some of the work. He does catch some passes out of the backfield as well. So at 6,200, if he was healthy, I might have some of him. If he's probable, maybe. The interesting thing of note, so Mills was by far the go-to guy in the backfield, and then Wan'Dale Robinson really took over. I think some of that was probably because Mills got banged up and left that ball game for a while against Penn State, because Robinson had 16 carries last week when he had 0 in their first couple of games. So they did mention before that game that they wanted to start giving him touches out of the backfield, so some of it was by design. So I'm not sure if he's going to see 15 carries like he did last week in that range, or if it's going to drop down to somewhere like 8 or so. It's very, very difficult workload to read. But anyway, last year when he got the rushing and receiving workload, he was very effective. He hasn't broken a big one yet, but I think if he keeps getting the amount of touches he got last week, he's for sure going to break one at 5,200. I think that's fine. I would like to see a quarterback have the ability to throw the football before playing him at 5,200, but against Illinois, I'm not sure how much it matters as long as he gets the ball. I think he'll do something nice, so he's okay at 5,200. I'll probably have a decent amount of Wan'Dale Robinson. Other than that, secondary receiving options, a team that's not going to pass the ball, I'm not super interested. If I go anywhere, it'd be Xavier Betts, very talented freshman, 3,900. They technically counted as a reception, but it's like a shovel pass scenario. And he's been seeing more and more of the field at 3,900. Isn't terrible. Workload probably won't be super fantastic. Moving on. Indiana versus Ohio State. Ohio State is 20.5 point favorite. Difficult to know how to feel about this one. Indiana's a good football team. Are they a top 10 football team? I'm not sure. Obviously they deserve to be there. in the rankings, but are they like, you know what I mean, a legitimate top 10 team talent-wise? Probably not. Could they keep this game close? Maybe. Ohio State hasn't necessarily been firing on all cylinders, especially defensively. The pass defense for Ohio State has given up 209 passing yards per game, not what we're used to seeing. So, and Indiana's offense has been pretty good. So I think I could use some of these guys as a one-off. Maybe I'll run one game stack because there's a chance Indiana really hangs with them. I don't know if I'd bank on that totally. So I don't really see why I'd play Penix at 6,600. He hasn't shown me enough mobility-wise. I think that's where his value would really come into play, but he's not really running. So I don't see him getting there. 66, he's fine, but they're supposed to be playing from behind. As far as the pass catching options, Ty Freifogel has really overtaken Whop Phillier as the top option in this passing game. Now, when I say that, I mean he's been way more effective than Phillier. Freifogel blew up 200 yards, 2 touchdowns last week. But they're still saying about the same workload. So I'm not sure he should be quite 1,300 more than Phillier. I think either one of these guys could have a decent game. I don't hate them. I think the prices are pretty good, especially Phillier's. I don't think he should ever be that cheap in a full PPR format. But again, like, is Ohio State's pass defense going to keep being beatable until I see them really stop somebody? I'm going to assume so, but I know they have a lot of talent back there, so difficult to bank on. Other than that, I think you have some decent cheap options. Peyton Hendershot, 3,800, one of the better tight ends in college football. I think he's fine. And Miles Marshall started playing. He's played 3 games now, I believe, and he's been fine in all of them. He's averaging 10 fantasy points per game. He's too cheap at 3,700. I'm going to use him as a lineup filler in a game they should be playing from behind. I think he could return value at 3,700. I think he's okay. He's not super exciting as 3rd/4th option on the team, but he's been pretty consistent in his 3 games. Justin Fields, you don't need me to talk too much. Oh, I forgot to go over there. Running back situation. Stevie Scott sees 20-plus rushing attempts each and every game. I'm not sure, playing from behind against Ohio State's not fantastic. Their rush defense has been better than their pass defense, but 6,400 is pretty cheap. I guess I don't hate it for a guy who sees 20-plus rush attempts. If you need a punt play, Samson James, I'm not sure why he's 3,000. Not sure why he's min-priced. He has 7 carries, 10 carries in his last 3. So for a guy seeing 24 carries over his last 3 games, you should never be min-priced. I get it. Secondary option against Ohio State isn't fantastic, but that's why it's a punt. Anyway, Justin Fields is Justin Fields. I will play some of him. He's somehow the 5th highest priced quarterback on the slate. Not sure why. I like playing Fields. I mean, he obviously has the rushing, obviously has the throwing. I just kind of like his ceiling and floor combination. Indiana has a good defense, yeah, but with teams like Ohio State and Clemson and whatnot and Alabama, it doesn't always matter. Like, Kentucky has a pretty good defense, but going against Alabama, it just doesn't really matter in college football. If you have that advantage offensively, it's just going to be there for the most part. As far as the stacking options, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are your guys. If you can pay up for them, I think Garrett Wilson is my preferred option. This guy's a stud. I would not look too much farther down than that. They really rotate guys. Ruckert, their tight end, saw no workload last year. He's very talented. He's finally seeing a workload this year, and he's been okay. You could go to Jameson Williams, but again, these guys rotate, and they none of them see very many targets. Julian Fleming, I think he was the top wide receiving prospect, but hasn't really been in there. I think Smith and Giba would be the guy I would trust, which it sounds ridiculous because he has 10 yards on the year, but he had 1 fantastic touchdown and one of those 5 catches. But yeah, I don't trust anybody. You could do worse as just punting with Ngiba. As far as the running backs are concerned, Teague has been the guy who, Master Teague, has gotten all the production, but he's still splitting carries with Sermon. Sermon has double-digit carries in each game he's played in. He's done nothing with them, correct. But still, Teague has only outcarried him 47-36, so I don't think the pricing difference should be that much. I've played some Sermon, I feel like each week, and he, again, has done nothing. But 4,900 is too cheap in this high-octane offense, so maybe. All right, App State versus Coastal Carolina. Very good game. This is definitely one I'll be watching in the 9 o'clock slate. I think I'll have this one and then the Ohio State game on the 2 main TVs. App State is probably going to be without their quarterback, Zach Thomas, who has taken pretty much every snap for them for what seems like forever. So that's not a very good sign. And they're also probably without their top running back, but we'll talk about that later. So some not great things for App State. This should be a low game total. I think it's around 47. Both teams have good defenses. So I'm not playing a ton of this game at all, so I'll kind of skip over it. They are playing this guy, Heisman. Whoa, that can't be pronounced Heisman. I'm going to call him Heisman. I said it, damn it. Anyway, if Zach Thomas plays at 6,000, I think he's fine. He has mobile ability. That's a good price for a guy who's been pretty consistent, even though he's going against good defense. I wouldn't have much interest in the new guy, Heisman. I looked into him. He's a 2-star. Doesn't really seem to run. Didn't really see anything interesting there. His high school stats weren't very impressive either. So hopefully he plays well so we get a good game. So that means I'm out on any and all receiving options. If you need a punt, I guess Jalen Virgil is okay at 3,400. He hasn't played every game this year, so if you look at his game log and see some duds, that's because he probably wasn't playing. There's no guarantee he's going to see a big workload. I would anticipate they lean on the ground, especially if they have that new quarterback. And App State is rushing for 261 rushing yards per game. So that's in the top 10 nationally. I think it's number 9. Playing with a new top running back out. So there's going to be some value here. So I'm not completely crossing them out. I will have some Cameron Peoples. And is it Marcus Williams? Marcus Williams Jr. at 5,300 and 4,500 respectively. I think Peoples is probably the better back. Williams has actually been seeing slightly more carries over the last couple of weeks than Peoples. So they had a 3-headed monster. So all these 3 running backs have been playing this year. We've seen them all. I've been slightly more impressed with Peoples. He's been more effective with his carries. So I think he's the slightly better back, but I think it's kind of splitting hairs because Williams should get more than 10 carries. So they're fine. The price is good. Coastal Carolina does have a pretty good rushing defense, allowing 3.9 yards per carry. But for a team that runs for 261 rush yards, it's going to be running a lot. I think the workload will be there. So I don't hate it. As far as Coastal Carolina, I don't know if I'm going to play any Coastal Carolina. I mean, Grant McCall's been fantastic. But at 8,000, that's really expensive. Freshman quarterback playing against App State, who has a very good defense. I don't love it, man. I don't love it. Coastal does average 37.9 points per game offensively, whereas App State is only allowing 16.9, so it's a great clash of styles. I think the top wide receiving option would be this guy. Oh, I never know how to say his name. Healy. At 6,700, he does have 611 receiving yards this year, which has been fine. I think there are better options on the slate. Like, he's 6,000 more expensive than Burks, which I think is asinine. Isaiah Likely, one of the better tight ends in college football. He's been dealing with injuries, which I don't love, and the workload hasn't been fantastic. So at 4,100, probably touchdown dependent. And the running backs, I mean, CJ Marable's your guy. He's expensive. But, I mean, week in and week out, he does a lot. See some receiving work. He's fine. You know, he hasn't gone over 100 yards in a while, which does kind of scare me. But he does get pretty consistent receiving workload. He's had a receiving touchdown in each of his last 4 games, and that goes back to last year. He was dangerous there at receiving the ball. If you really need a punt play, I think any of these 2 backup running backs, Reese White and Jones at 3,400 and 3,700, I think are decent because they do see some carries, but I don't love it because of the low game total. All right, Cal versus Oregon State. Cal, oh my God, if you didn't see, they played on Sunday morning. You probably missed it, 9 a.m. local time, which actually was kind of cool. The Rose Bowl is definitely a good Sunday morning venue. Anyway, I digress. Cal's offense looked terrible. They look terrible. So I'm not really targeting any of these guys. I think wide receiving option, Kakoa Crawford, should not be the 4th most expensive guys. He led the team with 8 targets, but it's kind of a mess in the receiving core. So at 3,800, maybe. I have some decent interest in Christopher Brown Jr., the running back. He's a big guy, receiving threat. Oregon State's rush defense has not been good. They've allowed 244 rush yards per game so far this year. Now, Brown only had, 8 carries last week. It wasn't a very close game against UCLA, so maybe that had something to do with it. They are running a pro-style offense. I'm not sure. It's a difficult one to call with Cal's offense not doing much. So I think Brown's okay at 6,300. If he does see 20 carries in this game, he could absolutely have a huge one. But I would say that's probably a big if. They have some other talented guys. Bradrick Shaw, Wisconsin transfer, and Marcel Dancy isn't bad in his own right. So, all right, as far as Oregon State, the passing offense was abysmal. They averaged about 4 yards per attempt last week. So until I see more from Tristan Gebbia, I can't play him even at 5,300. I will say, I think Cal's defense is overrated. They've had some good defensive squads, and Wilcox is a good defensive coach, but not a super big fan of their defensive coordinator. They lost a lot of their secondary talent to the NFL, and they lost Evan Weaver, and their D-line wasn't fantastic last year to start with, so I'm not really sure what the strength of the defense is supposed to be. I guess just that they're coached well, which can go a long way in defense, but I think they're a tad bit underrated. So I think all these guys are a little underpriced for Oregon State. Cal did give up 248 rushing yards per game to UCLA, and Jamar Jefferson is an absolute beast back there. So at 8,900, he probably deserves his price. I'm not sure I'm going to get there just because I think the other guys are a little bit more consistent and a little bit more trustworthy. You know, ETN, Najee Harris, Breece Hall, he's in those range of guys. So does he deserve it? Probably, but that doesn't mean I have to play him. As far as the receiving options, Trevin Bradford is the clear number one guy at 5,700. I think he's okay. Champ Fleming's a little short guy. Not a ton of interest. He's been getting some workload. Taylor's been getting some workload, but it's been kind of split between those two guys. It's splitting hairs. I guess I would go Taylor if I had to choose. And as a punt option, their tight end Musgrave has been getting a decent workload. He looked bad last game. He dropped a few passes. Was not pleased with his performance. But he has 7 points, 4.5 points, and he could have had more if he didn't drop passes, which is a big if you're a receiver catch the damn ball. But at 3,300, maybe. Not a ton of ownership interest in that game. Wisconsin versus Northwestern. I'm going to skip this game. I'm not really going to play it at all. Both teams like to run, but both defend the ball well. There's a total set at 44. They both play at a slow pace. Northwestern allowed only 2 rushing yards per game last week to Purdue. And Wisconsin, I would probably still play their running backs because they're cheap, but they're splitting carries. So I will not waste my time. All right, Cincinnati versus UCF. This is a great game. Really looking forward to this one. I took the over 63.5, even though Cincinnati does have a good defense. UCF plays at the highest pace in college football, and they have just been lights out. They've taken another step under Dylan Gabriel. I know it was a low-scoring 27-24 game last time these two teams matched up, but I think Dylan Gabriel's on another level now. I mean, that was one of his first starts last year against Cincinnati. So he's on another level. They've been scoring 44 points per game. So yeah, I took the over. So that means I'll have some ownership interest in this game. The problem is the pricing is really bad. So it's tough. Desmond Ridder has taken his game to a completely new level. He is averaging 41.8 DraftKings points per game over his last 4. I still don't know what to think about Ridder because he wasn't good last year. Well, I don't know if I go that far. He was very inconsistent, had some good games against bad competition, had some bad games against good competition. Didn't look the part. I will say, definitely meets the eye test or the smell test, however you're testing Desmond Ridder. He looks a lot better this year. He just takes off running. He's extremely fast, and he just beats the defense whenever he wants to running the ball. So, and he looks better throwing the ball. I mean, they're actually spreading teams out this year. Their offense looks different. They're spreading them out. They're giving them room to work because they know if they spread the defense out, they can beat them, which they've evolved offensively. So at 9,200, Ridder, I mean, UCF's defense is pretty bad. They allow 189 rush yards per game and 258 pass yards per game. Very beatable, somewhere in the 90s ranked defense. So I have some interest, definitely. As far as running back, Dokes is the guy. He keeps burning me whenever I play him. When I don't play him, he has a good game, so I'm not sure what to think. His workload has decreased every week. I think a lot of that is because Ridder is running the ball so much, and then Ford is also looking good. 20 to 18 to 16 to 13. Worries me a little bit. Does catch some passes. But at 6,700 in a game like this, I think that's a little bit too cheap. So I'll play some Dokes. I think Jerome Ford at 4,900. I mean, I was playing this guy earlier. He did nothing. Then I started playing Dokes, and now Ford's the one going off. I don't know what to think. I mean, I do think he's probably the better running back than Dokes. He's an Alabama transfer. The workload has not been there, though. He's only seen 6 carries and then 7 carries in his last 2 games, respectively. But in a game like this, I don't hate it as a second running back option. Nobody would be surprised if Ford got over 10 points. As a rule, I pretty much never play Cincinnati wide receivers, so I'm not going to take my time talking about them too much. They do spread the ball out. I think Weil, their tight end, it would be the guy I would play at 4,600 just because he's cheaper. If Alec Pierce, if I knew he was healthy, I would play him at 4,500, but that's a big if. He only had 1 target for 9 yards against East Carolina, so he did suit up. Looked like he wasn't healthy. Maybe they were saving him for UCF. I do think teams like this in the American Conference could actually do that. I don't always believe it when I hear it in the other conferences because there's just, crazy people who will justify anything their team does. Crazy SEC blowhards and whatnot. But I think there's some credence to that because they're trying to make the playoffs, and if they have a big game coming up next week, why would you play a banged up guy against East Carolina? They're East Carolina, for God's sake. So Alec Pierce at 4,500, big question mark, maybe. All right, UCF. I've already kind of gone over it. I will have some ownership interest here. I'm not going to go crazy. Their guys are a little bit too expensive for me to have as much as I would like. Dylan Gabriel, 8,700. I do think he's fine. We will know how good Cincinnati's defense is. You could argue Gabriel is somewhat matchup proof given the pace they play at. Marlon Williams is his clear top guy, 8,300. He has 942 yards on the season and 8 touchdowns already. Target hog, deep threat guy, short. He does everything. 8,300 is fine. Now, I will say a lot of this depends on the health of Trey Nixon at 5,400. Him and Marlon Williams, there was like a debate going into the year who would be the top guy. So Nixon's very talented. When he was healthy last year, he did have 830 yards and 7 touchdowns. So if he plays at 5,400, I think he's fine. I do think there could be some of that, saving him for the Cincinnati matchup. It sounds like he was warming up last game and maybe could have played, so I think he should play here. But again, college football, the news that comes out, the inactive news, it's very tough to read. Who knows? If he doesn't play, I will have some Jalen Robinson. He has been fine this year, 822 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's been really good. 6,500, just because he's cheaper than Marlon Williams. I'm not sure how much Marlon Williams I could afford in a week like this, so he's fine. I wouldn't go past those 3. Harris might catch a touchdown at 4,000 if you really need it. But yeah, running backs, all 3 of these guys get carries. Anderson, McCray, Thompson. Looks like Thompson's price, he should not be min-priced, but as the 3rd running back going against a good defense, he probably shouldn't be expensively priced either. But he gets carries and he's a beast, so maybe. But yeah, I think Anderson would be the top guy if you're looking to him there. All right, Iowa, Penn State. I have no ownership interest in Iowa. I guess you could play their running back, Tyler Goodson. He's a stud, but the workload isn't necessarily what I'd want to see at 7,500. I think he's fine. Tight end, Sam Laporta, maybe for a cheap guy, but I mean, I'm probably going to take the under in this game, and it's set at like 47.5. It's really low, so I don't expect much scoring. Big news for Penn State. Will Levis. I would expect him to start after he came in last week and was way better than Sean Clifford. I don't know. I say way better, and he was still 14-31. I don't think either of these guys is any good. Sean Clifford has had terrible turnovers pretty much every single game this year. One thing you'll keep hearing about Penn State is, oh, they lost, but they probably should have won because they outgained Nebraska or they outgained a team. While, I mean, anybody who's analyzing college football, you should look at the box scores and you should try to see what the big picture is. I think a lot of people are kind of dumbing down Penn State a little too much. I mean, are they a good 0-4 team? Yeah, maybe. But just saying, oh, they should have won. I just keep hearing that this week. It's like, well, they would have won if they had a good quarterback, and their quarterback sucks, and he keeps turning the ball over, and he's not good. And they're completing less than 50% of their passes. So I don't know. I just, like, maybe you should mention that as well instead of just, oh, they outgained the opponent. Well, they also made some fucking terrible quarterback plays. Anyway, Jahan Dotson's fine at 7,000. I think there are other wide receivers I prefer, but he's okay. It's basically consolidated between him, Washington, and Freiermuth, Dotson being the clear number 1 guy. But Freiermuth has 10-plus targets in 3 of his 4 games this year, one of the better tight ends in college football. He's fine at 4,800, whereas Washington has targets of 14 and 10 in his last 2 games. Hasn't been as effective with them, but with that amount of targets, I think either of these guys are okay. Some of that is because they were playing from behind, which I'm not sure if they will be in this game or not. So not much ownership there. Kansas State versus Iowa State. I won't spend too much time here. I think the Kansas State guys are too cheap, but at the same time, I don't really want to play them. Another game, there's not supposed to be much scoring. I think Will Howard at 5,300, you can make a case for Will Howard. He hasn't looked good when I watched him. I didn't watch him last week against Oklahoma State. He still completed less than 50% of his passes, but he ran for 125 yards, which is interesting because he also ran for 86 yards at TCU. Not much going in the other two matchups, but if he's going to run the ball like that, I mean, he has over 20 fantasy points in 2 of his last 4, and he got close. He has over 18 in 3 of his last 4, with, of course, a dud, but West Virginia has a good defense. Maybe. I think Iowa State's defense is a little overrated. I think they're fine. I think they're probably good, but I don't really think they're like a steel curtain. At the same time, Kansas State's offense isn't exactly good. Deuce Vaughn at 5,400. I mean, this guy has been laughably priced for most of the year. Now he has a decent price. He could break a long touchdown. Absolutely. He gets some receiving work, and he gets most of their rushing work. But as we can see, he hasn't been very effective. So no way we can bank on him being effective against an Iowa State rushing defense allowing 3.2 yards per carry. That's good. So either one of those guys if you need a lineup filler, but not thrilled about it. All right, as far as Iowa State goes, I mean, obviously Breece Hall, 9,900, the most expensive running back. He's been super consistent, about 30 fantasy points week in and week out. K-State's allowing 161 rush yards per game and 250 pass yards per game. They're beatable in both assets. I think Breece Hall is the only running back over 1,000 yards in college football. Kansas State allowing 4.3 yards per carry. So Breece Hall's fine. I'm not sure I'll be able to afford him, but we'll never knock you for playing Breece Hall. Brock Purdy at 6,800. There are better options. He hasn't really had a great year, but Kansas State's defense is beatable. I think my main ownership interest would come in Hutchinson and Kohler. Xavier Hutchinson, their top wide receiver, at 5,200. He's been pretty consistent. He's been seeing a fair amount of workload. He hasn't had huge games, but I think his floor is all right. At 5,200, still too cheap. Charlie Kohler, their tight end, is their other top guy. At 4,900, I think I prefer Hutchinson, but Kohler's fine. I think I'd prefer to go to like Freiermuth in that price range, or Jordan Addison, who I'll mention next. All right, Virginia Tech versus Pitt. I do watch Virginia Tech. Family goes there, so I don't know if I'd call myself a fan. Yeah, I'll say I'm a fan. So I watched their games, and oh my God, this is a frustrating team. Holy Toledo! I mean, they just blew the game against Liberty. I won't even get into it. Blew the game against Miami. Should have won the game, and their offense just absolutely goes in the toilet. When they need to pass the ball, they cannot pass the ball, which I think is a problem going against this Pitt defense. Pitt allows only 78.8 rush yards per game at 2.2 yards per carry. That's the best in the entire country. Pitt has a good rush defense. They have a good D-line. Whereas Virginia Tech is number 6 in rushing the ball, and they do it at a 6.1 yards per carry clip. So very good rushing offense going into very good rushing defense. I don't know how much ownership interest I can have in Virginia Tech in that spot. I think it makes for a fantastic matchup. I'm looking forward to watching it, but one of those under-the-radar games I was talking about. It's worth noting with Pitt, I mean, their offense is kind of going, or their season is kind of going off the rails a little bit. I think they're probably better than their record shows, but at the same time, I don't think they're well coached. I do think they're talented, but not great things going on there. Paris Ford, their star safety, allegedly, I didn't see it, but I think he got in like a sideline fight with a teammate, and now he's opting out for the year, or declaring for the draft, whatever they're calling it. I don't know if you can opt out when you've already played half the year. I don't know. So, very difficult game to call it with that in mind. Anyway, the reason I don't have a ton of ownership interest in the Hokies is because it's pretty much consolidated between Hooker and Herbert for their fantasy production. And Hooker at 9,100, I don't see how I can play him with the other star quarterbacks on the slate when he's going against a good rushing defense. So, no, thank you. Is there a chance he runs for 3 touchdowns? Of course. Herbert, 6,900. That would be a decent price, but I'm not super interested. He injured his hamstring. He did play through it last week. Didn't get the start, but came on the field when they needed him. I'm not sure he should have done that with a hamstring injury. I mean, I think that's going to linger. He looked okay. He was effective, but he he didn't look normal to me. It looked like he was definitely, he was running on it gingerly. So I can't even expect him to be at full strength. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, there will be some scoring in this game, so there's going to be spots to pick and choose. It's just difficult to pick and choose where. I'm not sure I can get to Virginia Tech's pass catchers in an offense or in a slate this loaded. I think Trey Turner's their top guy, and their tight end James Mitchell. It's pretty close between them. I think Turner has the more big play ability, whereas Mitchell probably has the more touchdown upside, but it's close. All right, as far as PITT, so the Panthers have only 3 rushes of 20 or more yards this season. That's dead last in the ACC. It's about and only 30 rushes of 10 or more yards all season. Only about 4 or more per game. Getting into my saying this is a weird matchup. Pitt can't run the ball at all. Virginia Tech can. Virginia Tech has 72, about 9 per game. So more than twice as good as Pitt's rushing attack. So very interesting. Whereas Virginia Tech's not great at defending the run, but Pitt's great at it. Anyway, I think this Virginia Tech team is beatable in pretty much all assets. So Kenny Pickett at 7,300. Normally I'd be interested in him as a sneaky play. I still am somewhat, but the fact that he's playing on a bum ankle and I don't know about a lot of his value, but some of his value comes from his ability to run the ball. He has a few rushing touchdowns already this year. I don't feel great about that on a bum ankle, but he could be sneaky. The running backs, like I mentioned, they can't run the ball, so I'm not really interested. If you are, Davis is your guy. Vincent Davis, not the other Davis, AJ Davis. But he's been bad. Rushing offense is bad. Jordan Addison at 4,900. I will have a lot of Jordan Addison at 4,900. I don't know why he's that cheap. He has seen double-digit targets in 3 of his last 4 games. He's a stud. He's a freshman. He has over 600 yards on the year. Only has 3 touchdowns, so he would probably be liable on breaking one. But he had 11 catches for 127 yards with Pickett back last week. I do think that helps him. So he's pretty good. If Mack is out, Taysier Mack, I think he's their second best wide receiver. I think that I'm going to have a lot of Addison. If Mack does play, I'll just have a lot of Allison, if that makes sense. Addison. Taysier Mack at 4,200. I think he's fine too. I think he's their second best wide receiver. He is questionable, so he may be playing banged up, and he has been pretty inconsistent. So worth monitoring there. No idea if he's going to play or not. It's college football. Nobody friggin' knows. Injury news. As far as moving on, Kentucky versus Bama. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on Kentucky because, why would you? But they will be playing from behind. Their offense has been so bad. It's just been abysmal. I would target the passing game in a game they should be playing from behind, but it's been so bad that I'm not really sure I can. If I need one guy, Josh Ali, I think, is their top guy. These guys, Upshot and Akeem Hayes, have been coming on strong lately, which means it's a no-go for me. Rodriguez Jr. at 5,000, that's not a bad price. Chris Rodriguez Jr. He has, usually they have like a 3-headed monster in the rushing attack, Rose, Smoke, and Rodriguez, but Rodriguez has really been seeing all the carries lately, so you could do worse. All right, Alabama, Mac Jones, maybe the Heisman frontrunner. I don't know if I go that far, but he might win the Heisman. And he's 8,500, I think the 7th most expensive quarterback on the slate. So, yeah, Kentucky's defense is good, but like I said, against offenses like this, it may not matter. Devonta Smith is the most expensive wide receiver on the slate, and I think for good reason. He's fine if you can get there. Obviously, his targets have been very consistent, over 10 per game. I think he had 15 his last time out. Jalen Waddle is out for the year, and that means we have more targets going to these other guys. So Smith looks like their definite number 1 to me. If I can't get there, which I may not be able to very often, pricing-wise, I think John Mechie III, 5,900, is definitely worth a look. He's a deep play guy, I guess, as pretty much all the wide receivers have been the last 4 years or so. Anyway, deep play guy, I think he probably benefits the most from Jalen Waddle going out, even though he doesn't necessarily line up in the exact same spot, but I think he would benefit target-wise. 5,900, that's a good play. Slade Bolden at 4,400 is okay. He doesn't really have that big play ability, or at least I haven't really seen it yet, but he should be getting a lot of those Jalen Waddle slot snaps. Anybody under that, we haven't seen it from them, I'm going to wait until they show me. Running back, I mean, they have Najee Harris. If you don't know Najee Harris by now, guy's a stud. Not much I have to say on him. He's fine if you can fit him in, as always. Where is he? Trey Sanders. Oh, he's out. I was thinking about playing him this week. He had 7 carries and then 12 carries his last 2 games, and he was min-priced. Car accident. Oh. My God. Hope he's okay. I guess that leaves Robinson at 3,200 as the next guy up, but I'm not thrilled about Robinson. All right. That does it for me. I'm not going to do too huge of a positional breakdown. I will do that in my article. Like I said, I'm going to pay up for at least one of these stud quarterbacks. I mentioned guys I would pay down for. I'll do that a little bit, but if I could get one of those stud guys and somebody like Franks, I think that looks very good. Or if I can get both stud guys, I would do that. I'm not sure I'm going to do that because there's not as much. I don't love the value at the running back position. I think there are some guys, like the Arkansas guys maybe, but it just doesn't line up well. I would definitely play 2 stud quarterbacks in most of my lineups if there were better, cheaper running back options, but I don't love them. So it's going to be a hard one this week. As far as running backs, I mean, you have the stud guys. Like I said, either one of them's fine to me. I'll probably get a little bit more ETN just because he's cheaper, but that might be lazy on my part. The mid-range down here is okay. I mean, I don't love Dokes, Stevie Scott, Chris Brown. I think they're all fine. I think I'm going to end up playing more of them than I want just from a lineup construction-wise. Right now, I made a few lineups and I had a fair amount of them. I wasn't thrilled about it. In the 5,000 range, I mean, Deuce Vaughn is okay. I think Cameron Peoples at 5,300 is okay. I think Chris Rodriguez at 5,000 is okay. Sermon at 4,900 is okay. Rakeem Boyd at 5,000, probably my favorite in that price range. And Traylon Smith is fine as well. I don't really love anybody. I'm going to have a lot of different running backs. I'm not going to be super high owned on any running back this week. And then everybody else I mentioned obviously is in play. Wide receiver, I mentioned the top guys. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to afford these top guys. I think they're all fine. Personally, I like Terrace Marshall. I think he's priced down at 7,000. Probably my highest owned wide receiver will be Traylon Burks at 6,100. Just doesn't really make sense, the price point to me. Other than that, I'll probably be forced into the lineup construction, and just because I like the guys down here, Xavier Hutchinson, 5,200, Wan'Dale Robinson, 5,200, Grimes, 5,100, maybe Woods, 5,000, maybe Fillier, 5,000, maybe Kohler, 4,900, Jordan Addison at 4,900. I'll have a lot of him. Other than that, Washington, Freiermuth, 4,800 are fine. Not super thrilled with any of the punt options, but I did mention some punt options as I went. All right. As far as FanDuel, I'm not doing a full FanDuel breakdown, but I do always play FanDuel. I've actually won a significantly more amount of money on FanDuel than I have DraftKings this year, and that was the same last year as well. So maybe I should just become a FanDuel guy, but no. DraftKings is just the better site in general. Anyway, some prices I like. Quarterback, JT Daniels, 7,500. Again, this is all on FanDuel. JT Daniels, new starting quarterback for Georgia. Georgia offense is ugly. Yes, they haven't had a quarterback who can throw the ball. JT Daniels was a 5-star, played in the USC air raid offense. He can throw the ball. 7,500, that's good. All the other quarterbacks I mentioned, there are a ton of stud quarterbacks. Some guys who are priced just a little bit below them, and I'm not sure why. Spencer Rattler at 9,800 and Dylan Gabriel at 9,600. I think they're a little bit underpriced. Other guys underpriced, TJ Finley, LSU's quarterback at 8,000. That's too cheap. And Kenny Pickett at 7,900 is a little bit too cheap. Running backs, Traylon Smith and Rakeem Boyd, the 2 Arkansas running backs. Smith is 6,800 and Boyd is 6,500. Just like a mispricing. That's way too cheap if you need any value on there. If you're playing 2 stud quarterbacks and any good wide receivers, you'll probably need some value. I think they're fine. Jacavius Marks, next running back up since Kylan Hill has gone AWOL at Mississippi State. This guy sees a lot of targets. He's pretty consistent, and he's only 6,000 on that site, but that's not a bad pump play at all, I would say. I will say it does hurt a little bit that in FanDuel you don't get quite the PPR that you do in DraftKings, so that does bring him down a little bit. If you're thinking 6,000 sounds a little too good to be true, it is still a little bit too good to be true, but not totally. I'm all over the place. It's still early. Coffee. Wide receivers, some prices that stuck out. Marlon Williams is only $8,900. Not sure why he's not expensive. Slade Bolden's only $6,500. Trey Nixon at $6,000. If he does play, Trey Nixon $6,000 is almost a must play. I mean, if he's healthy, that's just a home run. The big if. Peyton Hendershot at $5,900 and Miles Marshall at $5,800 for Indiana. As far as bets, I haven't been giving out bets. Just haven't been doing that. I don't know why. I guess it takes a lot of time to get this together, and I haven't had quite time to look at the betting breakdown. Plus, I haven't been doing as well the last couple weeks. I started off on fire, and then I don't know. I've had a difficult time of reading it, so I've been playing it lower personally myself. I've also been waiting later in the week with all the COVID news coming out. One of these I'll mention. I just got burned, so maybe I should just stop betting until like morning of. Kind of what I've been doing is like placing a half unit on it through the week if I like it, and then placing another half unit right before kickoff, because then I know what's the COVID issue. I could just get totally screwed if a team's whole offensive line is out. But that's been kind of burning me too, because then if I want to place another half unit before kick, if the bet is still good, the line probably moved. So then I'm getting a worse number. And if the line didn't move, then I'm worried that there's COVID issues, or there could actually be COVID issues. So it kind of seems like I'm screwed no matter what I do betting. Anyway, if you're into betting, I have Army -4 against Georgia Southern. Two option offenses. I think Army does it better. I think their defense is better than Georgia Southern's, and they have been practicing against the option offense, so I think they know how to stop that. You could say the same about Georgia Southern, of course, but they don't have as good of a defense in my opinion. UCF over 63.5. Like I mentioned, I will probably get to the window, so to speak, with UCF +6. That started at about -3.5. I thought that was a good line. Getting up to +6. I know they're playing in the bounce house. I know it's not going to be fully stacked, but fully packed stadium. But I don't know. I could see UCF being really sneaky. I think they're going to be fired up for this game. I do think Cincinnati's a better football team. UCF does not have a great defense, but I think that's going to be a fantastic game. Oregon -13.5. That one might be off the board because now Dorian Thompson-Robinson apparently has COVID for UCLA. That game's up in the air. It might not even be played. We can't get nice things in 2020, but we appreciate what we do have. Thanksgiving. Shout out Thanksgiving around the corner. Anyway, Wazoo +2. I took this over Stanford. Stanford stinks. They shouldn't be favored against anybody. I've been betting against them, and I have been happy. But Washington State's quarterback has COVID. Jaden DeLora, he's looked very good. They are supposed to have some pretty good backups, but I've never seen them play football, so I don't know if I would recommend Wazoo +2 anymore. I guess if that line gets even bigger, I would say Stanford's not a good football team. Wazoo's probably a better football team. So if you're brave enough to take them with a backup quarterback, it's probably still not the worst bet in the world. Anyway, still in Pac-12 action, I have Oregon State +5. I forgot who they were playing. Oh, Cal. Cal looked miserable against UCLA last week. Miserable. Like I said, they're a defensive team, or I think their defense is slightly overrated. It's not bad, but it's just a little bit overrated, and their offense isn't good. So Oregon State at home catching +5. Oregon State should have beat Washington last week. I don't know if I'll go quite that far. They probably should have beat Washington last week. They got the first down within the red zone twice. Running backs clearly laying over the first down marker, and the refs just didn't want to give it to them, I guess. I don't know. It was inexplicable. Like, just a joke. Pac-12 after dark. Of course, that would happen. And, I mean, Washington's a good football team. They're better than Cal, for God's sake. So, I guess it's hard to tell in this weird season. So, I don't know. Oregon State +5 looks good to me. All right, folks, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching. As I said, check out my article. I will post that here. I will post it on Twitter. It's coming out shortly. And as always, I'm on Twitter. If you have any questions or anything, I should be active there. I don't think there's going to be a thread this week because I made the article thread-like, where I put just all the thoughts I have instead of just highlighting a few random players. All right, folks, have a good one.